And welcome everyone to another exciting adventure on the energy that surrounds us. I'm your host, Michael, and I'm going to break a little bit from my normal intro routine to say I am so excited to see a very active chat room. I love when the chat room gets active, so thank you guys. I will get to your messages here in just a second. But I am going to share with you all that tonight's guest I am excited to have on. We have been chatting, I think, for 2-3 months now about this episode coming up. 5 months.
I think since October.
So I am super excited for you all to meet this guest and to hear her story because she has an aspect to her story I could not even begin to even try to explain in an introduction. So I am going to hand it over to the one, the only extraordinaire Jasmine Chapman.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for this amazing meeting that we get to have. So, to introduce myself. Well, I'm from British Columbia, little small town on a farm. Lived on a few farms. Kind of came here feeling like I didn't belong here. I don't know who these people are. I was far more comfortable with the animals in the barn, and I spent as little time in the house as possible. I was young growing up. I'm just a normal person, and I think that's what's so amazing about this journey is it's a journey of awakening to who you really are. You come in thinking that you're one way or you're a certain kind of person, and then this life ends up revealing that you're not who you thought you were. And yeah, it's been a journey of a lot of trauma, and not knowing why all this is happening. And cool.
Yeah, well, thank you for coming on and sharing your story with us. And it is an amazing story. And I'm a little bit curious. I know we've talked about it offline, but for those that are tuning in, what do you think is some of the big reasons that you survived what you have, and what drew you to find those methods?
Good questions. I like those. I like questions. Hmm. I think what motivated me to survive and actually even thrive was my mother, who made a choice to die. She made 3 suicide attempts and finally committed suicide when I was 24. First time I was 7, second time I was 18, and the final time was when I was 24. And she had this like a death wish on her. It was just a very dark, very angry energy. And I was blamed for her death. I didn't do what she said. I left home. She would kill herself. And I had to leave home because she actually tried to kill me the first time when I was 15. So all these traumas that I'd gone through, she chose death and I chose life. And I decided that I was going to really learn to make the best of this life. I don't understand why people choose those kind of things. When I was 14, I wanted to become, there was 3 things. I wanted to be a psychiatric nurse, I wanted to be a marine biologist, and I wanted to be an archaeologist, of which I never had an opportunity to go to university or anything like that to learn those things. But I see in my spiritual path that those things have all been implemented as I dive deep into, the darkness of the soul and the woundings. And a lot of water, with the marine biology, and to understand the psyche of people, what makes people tick. So I guess by 14, I decided I'm choosing life. And so every situation that came to me gave me a chance to prove that we're a whole lot more than what we think we are.
That's very true. And I'm kind of curious, along with, at 14, choosing this and having to go through all of that. How did you find mysticism and decide that's a path for you?
Mm, I love these questions. Actually, it's interesting. A good friend of mine on Facebook recently, we were chatting, and I brought up this book that I remembered reading. And I wasn't a big reader. As a kid, I was spent a lot of time out of the house, so I did not like to be in the house reading, and being quiet in there was just a scary place to be. And okay, so the first thing is, at 15 years old, my mother had some sort of a psychotic break and ended up smashing me over the back of the head with a big steel pot and threw me out of the house. And so I have not been back to my parents' house since that time. And on the way up the driveway to the road, I'm walking aimlessly, I'm in shock. I hear this voice that said to me, "You're more than that." And I thought, okay. And then walking down the road, 2 young men picked me up that were not from my area and took me to a hospital. They saw that back of my head was bleeding and they took me to a doctor's office, took me to the hospital. They weren't even from that place. So that was the kind of, I guess, was a spark. It's like, this is really interesting that these 2 young men, they were clean cut. And this is back in the 70s when we were long hair, guys did not look like that when I was a kid, when I was a teenager. So I was like, they were like angels that picked me up in a car and took me to well, to get help. And I got stitches in my head and what have you. They stayed with me until I was, recovered, went to another place to stay. And then not much happened. I mean, a lot of things happened in my life from that point. I ended up being raped violently, 16, and blamed, and there was no support at that time for women who had been raped. It was predominantly you were the reason it happened. You were blamed for it. So anyways, I just continued life the best I could. And then this book found me. this book called Illusions, The Adventures of a Reluctant Messiah. And I read that book twice when I was 23 years old, and I couldn't tell you what was in that book. I just knew that that book, something in that book was speaking to me, but it was beyond my head. So I've just came across it again, and now I'm starting to see what it was actually about. And actually, it's kind of like a reflection of my life that I've lived along the way. So that spiritual path, actually, I had no religious upbringing whatsoever. I grew up where it was bikers and it was a prison town. So there was a lot of criminal activity in my community. My school was called Garibaldi Rebels. So I started out being a rebel right from the get-go. It was right in my soul. Oh, yeah. So I guess the spiritual part of it was, it was so funny, actually. I had never decided I wanted to be on a spiritual path. It never occurred to me. So I had this occurrence with the book Illusions when I was 23. Somebody led me to God with the sinner's prayer, and I went to a church once, and it scared that freaking jeepers out of me, and I ran out of that church. It was probably fine, but there was something about mind control, and it scared me, and I didn't want any part of it. So I stayed away from anything to do with churches. I had this whole fear of Jim Jones and Guyana and the mind control. So I was oh no, I wouldn't go anywhere near anything like that. And then later, when I was 31, well, actually, my mother committed suicide when I was 24, so that was an opening. Oh, that's the other thing. I was with a friend and who knew my mother, and we were sitting at a restaurant. I'd flown from Ontario to British Columbia to deal with her death, and I had dinner with this friend of mine in a restaurant, and I was talking to her about this whole thing. She knew, and she said to me, she said, "Your mother's here." And my mother, she said, was standing behind her in the restaurant with her hand on her shoulder and speaking to her words that there's no possible way she could ever know she couldn't know what she said. And the only thing I can remember out of those words that she said was, in 7 years, basically what I got out of it was, in 7 years, things would begin to make sense. Things would start to become cohesive and begin to make sense. So she died in 1984. And then in 1991, I had this experience where this friend of mine or neighbor led me to God in a sinner's prayer because I needed to make a way for my youngest child to go to this school that was going to suit him better than most of the public schools. It was a Christian school, which that time I didn't even know what that was. So she told me about this school for about 2 weeks, and I got excited about it. And I decided, yes, I want my kids to go to that school. So I told her this. I said, I want them to go. And she said, well, you can't. They can't go to that school. And I said, why? Well, because you're not a Christian. I said, oh, so what do I have to do to be a Christian? I thought I had to sign a document or something to prove I was a Christian. I didn't know. And she laughed at me and she says, no, we have to pray. I said, that's ridiculous. I said, how are they going to know I'm a Christian if I pray? They're not here. How are they going to know that? So anyway, I prayed with her, and something happened. Something happened major, and that was September the 11th of 1991. Imprinted in my soul something that day. I had an encounter with Christ, and he opened up it opened up my soul, my heart, and I don't know, it's the weirdest. It's like something just went boof in my reality, and I had no sense of stability for a while. I was kind of in this like when your phone reboots, you got this black stage. I was kind of like that. I was getting a reboot, and I didn't know what the heck was going on for a while. But anyways, I began my healing journey, and I started with dreams. I had a lot of dreams given to me about what was going to happen, how it was going to happen, and that's basically been what has guided me, was these dreams, and then learning to listen to my own intuition and synchronicities, and yeah, has been my guidance for almost 35 years now.
So I'm kind of curious, and I know I look at things in a different perspective than most people, so I'm curious, when you look at your life where you are today, do you think the spiritual awakening would have happened as it unfolded had those events not happened? Or do you think it would have awakened and what happened had no impact on the unfolding?
Yeah, the events definitely impacted every step of the way. I think if even if one of them had not happened, it would have not got me to where I am. It almost feels like, stones in a stream. You have to go on every single one of those in order to get to the other side, or you know, not miss what was here for me.
So, I don't know why I'm being guided to ask this question, but it's coming into my head, so I'm going to ask it.
Yeah.
If you were to have a moment where you could talk to your 14-year-old self or your younger self with everything that's going on, what message would you give yourself?
Mm, mm. You're not alone. I'm right here with you every step of the way. I'm holding your hand, actually. And even though you can't see what's ahead of you, I'm right here. I'm right here.
Very cool. I like that. And I gotta admit, I'm kind of surprised you had an answer right away. I was kind of thinking it was going to take some thought. You must be thinking about that sometimes.
I think that actually comes from one of the dreams I had. I had some very interesting dreams. The spirit, higher self, source, I'm not sure, but it was definitely clear what was being shown to me. So one of the dreams I had was, this would be probably about 1992, maybe. I was a very little girl, and I'm walking with Jesus, and got my right hand in his left hand. And we're walking along, and I'm blind, but we're walking, and it's a nice flat um, pathway. It was easy. I felt safe holding his hand, and he's very big, and I'm very small. And it was lovely. And then we continue on the path, and it starts to get a little bit, the train changes, and it's starting to become a little bit rough and a little uneven ground. And I'm like, hmm. And then we start climbing up a hill, and it feels like we're going into a mountain up a trail or something. And so it's windy and kind of steep and up and down. And I'm like, a little bit, eh, I don't, I'm not sure what you're doing here. Okay, so I'm going. And then we continue, and it's like now I'm getting this branch slapping me in my face, and I'm tripping over a log, and I skin my knee on a rock, and I'm starting to get pissed off, honestly. So you could say that on here, but I'm just getting pissed off, and I'm like, I take my hand out of his, and I cross my it's like this. And I'm like, I'm not going with you anymore. I don't know where you're taking me or what you're doing. I don't like this. I'm getting hurt. And he never talked to me. He never said a word, but I felt his presence there with me. And he was letting me have my tantrum, and I did have tantrums. And he just was quiet, and he just held space for me. He just waited for me to get over myself, because I realized once I was calming myself down, it's like, geez, I don't even know where I am. I don't know I don't know where I got nowhere to go. I have no idea. I'm blind and I'm in the middle of who knows where. And it's like, okay, so I wear myself out completely and realize, okay, so back in this hand again we go. We carry on, and it gets steeper and rougher, and I get hurt more, and I get angry, and I cry, and I'm again. So that happened 3 times, and that was the end of the dream. And then 20 years later, I had that dream again after a bunch of events happened, of course. And everything was exactly the same in the dream, except for this time. And then I was in 2011. This time, the dream I wasn't blind. I was still small. He was still big, but I wasn't blind now. I had after 20 years. And so that's what I would say to my 14-year-old self, who was on this path and didn't know where she was going or what was ahead of her. And there's nobody else there. Every person in my life had rejected and abandoned me, except for the spirit or Jesus or Yeshua or whatever you want to call him, the Christ spirit, my higher self. It's like just a picture to me. It's not really religious. It was just a path that I was open for me to walk down. And so that would be the biggest thing is I'm with you. I'm not just that 14-year-old girl. There's another part of me that I'm in the process, that journeys to awaken to that part of myself, the wholeness of myself, not just the fractured 14-year-old.
No, that's a beautiful thing. And I was kind of looking at it as through all the rough times in your life, you were not alone. And so it's like, yeah, it looks like he was dragging you or, walking like you said, and you're getting hurt. But then I was like, or is it you're getting hurt and he's walking with you? And it's
That's
the
it.
other way.
Yeah. Yeah, because I couldn't see things coming. He'd be trying to, and I'd slap into things or tripping over things I couldn't see. But he stayed with me the whole time. Every step of the way, actually, I've had so much trauma. I've had people say, oh, that can't happen to one person. I said, well, it did. And I'm still here, and I'm still full of joy. And I mean, I could write a resume of traumas and rejections. Spinal fusion, massive stroke from a hole in my heart, from a birth defect, and open heart surgery, and suicide and attempted murders. 2 of them. One was my mother. Another was somebody else, and who was actually a hitman. Uh, anyway, I was able to talk him down, and I had a broken back when he came to take me out. Mm. Oh, I talked him down, and he felt so bad. He ended up coming back the next day, and I talked to me for 3 hours and cried, and he never bothered me again. I had a friend with me when he threatened my life. I have a full-page email of her experience when she came over at this threat, that we will be in a pool of blood on the floor. So it's like one thing after another. I just felt always held and guided, not by any person on this planet, not anybody, but something inside of me would hear a voice, or I don't even know if I'd say it. It's kind of like a voice. It's like an impression, maybe telepathic or something. It's like you just get an impression about things. Lots of things have happened. I was taken down a flight of stairs. Like I was, this is about a month or so after I had this encounter of September the 11th of 1991. I slipped down these stairs. They were icy. 14 stairs on my back deck to concrete floor. And when I slipped, it's really hard to describe how this felt. And I've only ever had seen it written one other place, and that was Masters of the Far East, a story that they wrote in there. Anyways, I slipped down these stairs, and I was floated down. I didn't hit a stair. I didn't feel a hair move. Nothing. I was placed at the bottom of the stairs on that concrete, like I was not even, you couldn't even feel a bang of my, nothing even, no pressure, no air movement, nothing. Placed there. When I got down the bottom there, every hair in my body stood on end. I said, what the heck just happened here? And I looked back at where I just came from, 14 flight, stairs up. And but this is the kind of thing that's happened to me over and over and over again. These miraculous things where I'm held and guided when it doesn't look possible.
No, that's really amazing, and I love how you're able to recount the experience and how you've had so many. And we actually have a question for you in the chat room.
Hmm.
And Rhonda Wolf 3058 is asking, how did you turn your trauma into a path of healing for you and for others?
Hmm. That's a very good question. Let's say again, this has to do with my mother. Um, the last 5 days she was alive, I spoke to her on the phone, tried to convince her to come to Ontario where I was. Um, she had made a comment along one of our conversations these last 5 days that she had thought about killing herself again. And so I'm like working so hard to convince her to come to Ontario, to just come here and be with your grandchildren and, change your headspace for a little while and things will seem brighter on the other side. And she did actually buy tickets and changed it 9 times before she finally decided to exit this life. And inside of me, what I felt was if people could only know the truth about who we are and that fear is an illusion, they wouldn't have to suffer the way they do. And so I guess I spent my life overcoming every fear I could see at work in my life and wanted to free myself of every bondage that could distort my thinking and have me end up like her. Because I came to points in my life when it was so intense where I just wanted to check out as well. And then I was like, I can't even leave here because I know the pain that suicide caused other people. And so I guess it inspired me to really live in power. And um, if I can do it, it's like anybody can do it, and they don't have to end up like her or other people on the street, um, addicts, where they're just destroying their lives and so on. And my whole heart just wants to help people see it as a way better way to live. And it's if you live in your heart, really.
I agree, and I think the world would be a totally different place if we were coming from an emotional place of love, peace, serenity, instead of coming from fear and being all the fear mongering that's going on and getting caught in that trap. And so you said that so well, and I just wanted to kind of reiterate that a little bit. That yeah, if you can get free of the mind trap known as fear, then the world can be a totally different place.
Totally different. Yeah, and that's the thing is, fear is really has power because it is rooted in lies. And if you can know the truth, fear has no power over you anymore. That suffering people experience because they feel rejected or they feel they'll never be forgiven by the church for something that they have done, that they can't forgive themselves for that. And the fear of punishment, the fear of I can't be forgiven, and how that can just destroy a person's life. And so even the lies, showed in the church, that was a big part of my desire too. I ended up going through time in church, but it felt like I was guided by my higher self or by the spirit to actually go in there and learn what power that these systems have over people's minds. It's like I needed to go into it to see and feel what that's like, that power that they have. Like why do people do what they do? And so I thought, a lot of it was to do with fear of hell, ultimately. Where I
No,
turned my phone.
I agree, and I'm kind of wondering because, and I'm kind of putting this in through my filters and my perception, so correct me if I'm wrong. You talk about in the tag of things you want to talk about curse breaking, and I wonder because of the view of fear that and how you look at it, did that play a part in going and saying, hey, curses can be broken, this is how you can do it? Or was it the other way around? You broke a curse and you're like, hey, I got nothing to fear.
Hmm. I broke the curse and have nothing to fear. That was a good question. Um, and thinking about, I remember actually making that conscious choice. And after I had this encounter, this awakening encounter, um, when I began my healing journey of the abuse in my life, I had a lot of sexual abuse and all kinds of abuse, and how it was silenced. Actually, when I was 7 years old, or 6 years old, uh, I had an uncle who sexually abused me, and I went and told my mother about it. And she picked me up and shook me and threw me against the wall, and I slid down between the bed and the wall. And she said, "Don't you ever tell your dad because he will kill Uncle fill in the blank, Uncle." And that silenced me right there. It was like something actually was a band on my throat, and I couldn't scream when I was being abused from that point on. It was just, I was shut down. And so when I actually really began my healing journey of deep stuff, deep inner wounds, childhood wounds, all the sexual abuse wounds, what have you, I made the conscious choices. I'm going to break the silence. I'm going to break the silence. I'm going to speak. I'm going to normalize this. And it cost dearly, but what I saved was my own integrity in that whole thing, because the family wanted to just silence, either physically, I'm turning on the light here, threatening me if I spoke about, about the things that had happened. And I have a cousin too who went through very similar things as I do. So we actually have that in common, that we can talk about that, together now. But yeah, it was a conscious choice to break the silence, to break the curse. I'm not actually, when I started to, I made that declaration consciously, and then I would begin to try to speak, and I actually would get a red mark on my neck. I was also strangled. I would get a red mark on my neck every time I try to speak these kind of things. My whole body would start trembling, and they were just almost like it was a strangle mark. So it was a work to break through that and just breathe and tell myself I'm okay. And eventually I was able to move through that fear. It was horrendous. So I mean, it was like moving around in my stomach. Yeah, it felt like an actual energy or entity, whatever, that was in me. And I actually felt that when my mother, the day that she smashed me on the head, first she smashed me on the ground, and I saw in her eyes something very dark, and it jumped into me when she was smashing my head on the floor. And so that was what I was working at getting out for about 2 years, I guess. Um, After I had this encounter, I had this awakening. And then it was a good 7 years of healing myself after that.
So I'm wondering, knowing what you know today, looking back at how your mom was acting, would you say that that could have been an attachment and that's why she was acting the way she was, that she was being influenced by something? Or do you think, no, she really did have a condition and the attachment program is kind of like a get out of jail free card that people use?
Yeah, exactly. Um, she definitely had trauma. She definitely had a lot of trauma. She got stuck in England during the Second World War, uh, from ages 3 to 9. She was taken, the youngest of 7 kids, was taken back to England from Winnipeg, Canada, to pick up her grandmother. So her mother took her there, and they got stuck during the war for 6 years. So her 6 siblings were here in Canada, and she was stuck there. And in London, I guess there was bombing and what have you, and horrendous things. The grandmother, I guess, died, and they couldn't get her body out of the room or out of the house. And so my mother, at 3 years old, to be like eye level with this body and not enough food, and the chaos and suffering of war. So she had this trauma, and then of course my grandmother was very bitter from that whole experience. Um, and so I think it was an attachment. I think fear got a grip on her, and she was very obsessive and compulsive in pretty much everything that she did. Yeah,
Uh,
she finally took her ass up, 47.
okay, and we have another question out of the chat room for you. Um, Frank Chapman 7916 is asking, in all that you have gone through, how did you manage to get to this point in your life?
It's like breadcrumbs on the path, one breadcrumb at a time, I'd say. Synchronicities, a door would open, person I'd meet, something would happen that would move me to the next stage. Yeah. I always felt in my gut, right in that, you know, your solar plexus region there. I've always felt deeply in that part of myself. And I remember even as a kid, I couldn't lie. If I tried one time, I was 17 and I lied. And both my armpits, it's like somebody turned on a tap and they flooded with water. It's like, for flip's sake, it's like, I can't even tell a lie. So my body would tell me right away when something was, when I would, you know. So I was guided by how it felt, I guess.
Yeah. So Rhonda Wolf 358 has another question for you. The phrase "just pray about it" falls so short. How do you help people break free from the superficial standard answer found out there, especially with turning into what the body tries to tell us?
Tuning in, yeah. I ask questions. Part of my training was, well, after I had a massive stroke, I ended up rehabilitating myself. They told me I'd never walk and talk again, and I was able to run down the hallway in the hospital after 11 days. And then I had surgery, open heart surgery, to repair the hole in my heart. Um, so, as far as just praying about it, the medic. So basically, what I rehabilitated myself, I retrained myself at 45 years old. I started a new career, and I trained as a first aid attendant and started up my own business as a medic. First aid, mobile first aid treatment stuff. I did it in an oil patch in northern British Columbia and Alberta. And I only did that for 2 years. I had a 5-year plan, but my back ended up going out and I ended up with spinal fusion and what have you. So I couldn't get the medical for the licensing anymore. So I couldn't continue. And I was questioning, like, why, God, are you doing that? Like, why is this door shutting? I couldn't figure it out. It was a whole nother upheaval in my life at that point. But anyways, a few years later, I heard the spirit say that those skills were transferable. They go from a physical, hands-on medic in the oil patch out in the field to now I'm being using those skills as a spiritual medic. So I don't pray about, I don't tell people just to pray about it because that feels like a little pat answer just to kind of get rid of them. But I ask questions like I would be doing an assessment if he came to me and said, well, I have this problem or whatever, something I'd start to do. I'd ask questions um, rather than telling people to pray about it. It's like, let's get to the root of it. Let's find out what's going on.
I'm kind of curious because this came across my path this morning talking with someone, and I'm curious with all the work that you're doing with helping others and helping yourself. Has there ever been a moment where somebody reached out to you and was like, I have this problem, can you help me with this? And everything inside you is like, walk away, don't engage, don't help this person. Has that ever happened to where you're like guided not to help them in the usual way and that the actual help is to walk away?
Yeah, it absolutely has happened. I don't know that I can say right off the top of my head that it's happened right away, but I generally will ask, certain questions to find out how sincere they actually are. And if they're looking for, a pill or, a spiritual pill to help make it better quickly, yeah, absolutely. It's like they're not ready for what I do or where I would take them. And so, yeah, and so I absolutely have done that.
Yeah, and so when you are doing the quote like spiritual medic aspect, I'm wanting to clarify this because I feel like some people may hear spiritual medic and go, "Oh, you're doing that psychic surgery stuff," and so I just want to clarify for everybody. It's is that totally different, or is that somewhat what you do?
Um, what I seem to be able to do is when a person comes and I get a sense of what's going on with them physically or emotionally, mentally, uh, I seem to know how to ask the right questions to get to the root of what that's about. So if you can get to the root of it, then usually physical ailments are 99% of the time going to be connected to an emotion that hasn't been dealt with. It's been suppressed. So I basically ask the questions to help open up where this is coming from. Where's the infection? You know.
And I have a kind of curious question for you, and it's nowhere in your bio, so I don't know if this even comes to being in your wheelhouse. So if it's not, feel free to just say that's not in my wheelhouse. But as you're talking with people and getting a sense of working with them, have you come across what we're starting to call in the terms of like hybrids, where you have human DNA, but you also have what some people call star seed or alien aspects to themselves, and so they're considered hybrids. Have you come across those? And if you have, what was it like? Is it very different or?
If a star seed is a lot more aware of themselves and their surroundings and uh, their own emotions generally. Um, I have come across people who are completely unconscious, unaware. Like I'm wondering how they even breathe sometimes. Yeah, it's yeah, it's very different. Um, hmm,
I wonder if those people would be like the term we use that comes from the gaming community, NPC, a non playable character.
yeah, yeah. It's almost like they don't have a soul. They go about doing almost like they're plugged in, and if you unplug them, they just kind of, you know, you know, stop, and the energy stops. It's there's nothing. I have. It's so it was weird actually meeting people like that or connecting with people like that. Like, where are you? It's like, where are you in there? They're not in there.
I don't mean to get into like your personal life too much, but I'm curious.
You go
Do
for it.
you feel
That's what
like
it's for.
with what you've overcome and how you've overcome it, because like you said, star seeds see everything differently. Would you call yourself a star seed or hybrid?
Yeah, I think for the most part in the collective, the spiritual collective, I guess I would be classed in that grouping as a star seed. Kind of feel like I'm even beyond that. And I don't know if I really know exactly what I mean by that yet. I'm still in the process of discovering even my own self and my own galactic roots and so on. But I do feel connections to, um, Pleiades and Mintaka, very strong Mintaka energy there. Um, Lyran, Pegasus. There's a few things in there, but I don't feel like I feel lifetimes there, but I don't feel like I'm more of a wanderer. coming from, not really attached to anything in particular. Almost like I feel like I'm from a high council, a guardian council.
Very cool. And Frank has another question for you that I think is interesting. And he says, the work you do as a spiritual medic, likened to walking with people through their dark night of soul work if they want freedom.
What's the question exactly?
I think he's asking is when you're doing your spiritual medic as- aspect and helping people, are you able to help them through dark nights of the soul work, or is that
Hmm.
something individual?
Yeah, actually, that's exactly what I do. Um, help people remember who they are, and then at the same time, they're also looking at their woundings, any unprocessed emotions, resentments, unforgiveness that they may have towards others, or predominantly a lot of it's themselves. So yes, it's a journey. I have a wonderful group of people that I've had in Zoom groups over the last 8 years going through that very process. And I kind of called it jumping on Jasmine's magic carpet ride. And so we'd get onto this carpet and we'd explore all these different things. So I was helping them learn the truth about all kinds of things, things that have been hidden from us, including religion. At the same time, um, dealing with helping them deal with their triggers, all these triggers that would come up, and it would really show up beautifully in a group setting. They'd be rubbing edges on each other and irritating one another, and so they get an opportunity to say, "Oh, what's going on inside of that trigger there? Why are you so agitated with so and so?" So we'd work through those kinds of things as a group and helping deal with conflicts and all those kinds of things. So we kind of had a package deal where we're doing the dark night of the soul, healing, and an awakening to what is really going on in this world at the same time. So we go into this magic carpet. So we're going to go into one field. I said, okay, don't get used to staying there too long. We're going to stay here for a while. We're going to glean what we need from there, and we're moving on to the next one. So you don't get stuck and attached to any of these places. And like I said, all the emotional wounds and past life things to be coming forward, and maybe starting to connect dots and working out situations with different relationships that they had. Yeah.
How do you address when you're working with individuals and you're picking up on something like you're saying, from past life? How do you approach that? Because I find that is a topic where people either believe or don't believe. And so, and it's really hard to judge who does and who doesn't. So, how do you approach that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think the way it came up with in the group is as they would be talking about different um, pain or reactions that they'd have to situations, would continue to do an investigation, like a doctor trying to figure out, diagnose, so to speak, what's going on here. So in knowing their story, their of this life, if the reactions or their response or reactions to things, it didn't fit in this life. It fit in other lives, and I would actually get visions, or I guess visions. I would get a whole message about their past life. Like I saw things, I'd see things actually taking place. Um, Sometimes very traumatic things. And I would say what I was seeing, and I'd say, does this resonate? And their bodies would respond if it did. And it always did. their bodies would be like, okay, and then tears would be coming and what have you. So they knew this was true, and then they started to remember themselves. It's like it was a door that got opened. So that's how I see about the past lives. Or sometimes they would remember themselves. I've had a couple of my people in my group there actually had memories of having past lives with me as well, where I was the one who was persecuted and they were the persecutor. So it was we got an interesting connection with that here in this lifetime to restore and heal what happened in a past lifetime, even towards myself.
Yeah. Rhonda Wolf 3058. I'm going to put this back up because I think this is really nice and validation for you. Is she says, I've received this work and I'm thriving because of it. Lots of work left for me to do, but it is incredible. Thank you for helping me climb out of the dark night.
Oh, wow. Oh, thank you, Rhonda. It's really lovely. Well, yeah, she's really come such a long way. It's incredible. Just a little over a year now. It's this process it takes time. It takes time and it takes working and needing gentleness and consistency and light and no judgment. That's, yeah, so it's like I'm creating a sense of safety in the group so that this can happen together instead of just in the counselor's office. It's like we're feeling of a life sentence there.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
I have an interesting perspective question for you, and that
Hmm.
is with you being in Canada, do you feel like you landed and settled in Canada because they would be more open and you would have more freedom to do what you do than other countries? Or do you think you're just lucky to be there and lucky that it turned out the way that it did?
Yeah, it's a good question too. It's interesting. Almost everybody that I work with is from the U.S. Online. There's almost nobody close by me here that resonates much with me. I have really good friends, neighbors, and so on. They love me, and but most people I think don't know what to do with me. Um, it's mm, it feels to me like Canada was more primitive. I grew up in a very remote um, environment where I had very few people around me. So I don't feel like it was easier here because everywhere I turned, there was persecution. So it was a constant having to uh, stand against a force that wanted to keep me quiet.
Very cool. And so we are getting to the hour. Where can people find you if they want to get your help with doing some of this work?
Probably Facebook's. I'm mostly on Facebook. I've got some email as well and TikTok, Instagram. I think I've got the links. I think I'll give you the links for that. But
And
Facebook's the best way to reach me. I don't have a website because I really have nothing to sell. I just I guess I'm here to help people see that there's so much more to their lives than what they could even imagine. That we're so much stronger than we even know. That whole concept of feeling like a victim and powerless. Um, it's a mindset. If you can move through the fear, there's nothing we can't do. I went through that leukemia journey, and through 2021, with AML leukemia, which is acute myeloid leukemia. Came out of nowhere. I've been healthy. Came out of nowhere. Anyways, I was taken into, we flown to Vancouver General Hospital by ambulance because it was, they gave me 2 weeks to live here in Kelowna when I went to the hospital. 2 weeks if I didn't go to Vancouver and have this treatment. So I was guided actually to do the chemo, which is insane to me. My ego was like, that's insanity. It's a death sentence. But my higher self, I felt it because I was in this inner battle. But anyways, I knew I was being guided. So I did the chemo. And I had a stem cell transplant. And the whole journey was a 9-month journey. So at the end of it all, I saw that this is a birthing. This is a death and a birth here during that COVID time. And something changed. It feels like leukemia is cancer of the blood. And I had a glimpse of like a thought that happened in my head in 2009 when I had a whole lot of physical things going on. I had another stroke and back stuff going on. And that word leukemia came to me. The doctor said I had so much, so many MRIs and so much radiation and whatever. She said that I was at high risk for leukemia. And I ended up with leukemia in 2021, or actually from the end of 2020. But what I saw was that at the end of it all, by the time I got back home again, was it's like, why did that happen to me? As a spiritual medic, like I had none of the emotional signs that would result in something like leukemia. I had no emotional trauma left. I had no fear. I had nothing. I was like solid and grounded in my whole self here. So it made no sense to me why this is happening to me. But I saw that it actually was if one person can do something, then it can happen for many. So what I felt like I volunteered obviously to do this, to actually transmute the life blood or the cancerous blood. How do I say this? To transmute the planet's cancerous toxic life force that was taking place during that COVID time in my body. To turn that death into life, even with the chemicals, all the chemo that I had. And the first one didn't work, so I had to be in there for another month as well, to have a stronger dose of chemo to try and knock this down. So it really seemed to mirror what was going on with the COVID. And then at the end of that whole thing, by the time I got home, basically it was over. And I am totally fine. I'm considered a chimera now because I have 2 different kinds of DNA. So I have my donor, who is a 23-year-old young man. I did never get to meet him, and my own, because they kill your own bone marrow when they give you the new stem cells. And so it was a total death and rebirth that took place in that 9-month period of time. And it just feels like one person can change it for many. So that whole idea of quantum, it's hard to even put into words yet. My consciousness, my mind is like struggles to try to make sense of what I've done, but I can feel it in my spirit at a higher level. It was a breaking of a curse.
No, it's really beautiful, and thank you. And I want to say thank you to everyone in the chat room for your great questions and for joining us tonight. And I just want to say to you, Jasmine, from my heart and the heart of my shows to you, thank you for what you're doing for humanity. It's seen, felt, and heard.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yes, and if everyone will follow along with my page and my channels, you'll might catch Jasmine as she comes back on. You never know. So, thank you, everyone. And we are going to sign out for the end of this episode. And hopefully, you all will join me for future episodes that are coming. And so, with that, I'm going to say blessings to you all and good night.
Good night. Blessings. Thank you.